Beginner's Guide to Showing Cobs series. My name is Demi. This is Woody. He's going to be my glamorous assistant for this video. Aren't you, sweet boy? And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about tack. What tack can you use for a horse show? Now, as I said before, this series is specifically targeted towards the first-time shower, the inexperienced shower. We're talking low-level shows, fun shows, local shows, that kind of thing. A lot of people make quite a big deal over what tack you can and can't use for showing. And whilst I would agree getting expensive fancy tack looks good, it probably makes you feel a heck of a lot better as well to know that you've got that fancy gear and you just look that little bit sharper. But you don't have to have it. It seems to be this great big myth that if you're going to take a horse into a show ring, you have to have a really expensive showing saddle, and you have to have a really expensive custom-made bridle, and you have to have all the fancy clothing and saddle pads that cost like £180. Trust me, I've looked. They literally cost that much. It's crazy. But you don't need all of that stuff. You just... oh, there's a fly. Sorry about that. You don't need all of that stuff. You just need some really plain, simple, well-fitting tack. And that's what I'm going to show you guys today. Okay, so first of all, let's cover ridden showing. This is going to be for traditional cobs. Obviously I have Woody with me. He is a traditional gypsy cob. However, what I'm going to show you is also perfectly acceptable for your show cob. So if your cob is hogged and clipped, it's also going to be perfectly acceptable for like part-bred cobs, cob crosses, anything like that. So whilst I am using my gorgeous traditional gypsy cob, who is merrily dozing off over there as my glamorous model for this video, the tack I'm going to show you is perfectly acceptable across the board for all cobs. So let's straight in and we're going to have a look at ridden tack. Okay, so I've got a whole bunch of stuff out here. Let's start with saddle and saddle pads. Now, as I was saying a minute ago, there seems to be this misconception that you have to have a really fancy showing saddle. Now, I will agree, proper show cut saddles look spectacular. They look so comfy, they really show off the horse to its best. But a normal general purpose saddle will do just fine. Lots of people use working hunter saddles as well. You don't want to use a dressage saddle, I will say that, and you don't want to use a jumping saddle because they are the two extremes of the saddle world. But a good GP or a show saddle or a working hunter saddle, you want something nice and straight cut for a cob because you want to be showing off these beautiful shoulders. So you don't have to have an expensive saddle. This is Woody's everyday saddle that I have here. He shows in this. He has always shown in this. And he will continue to show in this until I finally have the money to upgrade to a different saddle for him. That's just the way it is. Girth. Now, when you're showing, you want... oh, this is absolutely filthy. I haven't cleaned this, guys. I do apologise. You want plain girths for showing, preferably to match your saddle. Now, officially, you want either a black, brown or white girth. So yeah, he has a brown girth with a brown saddle. Now here's another thing that always comes up is people always say you have to show in brown tack. Now that's absolutely not the case. Most people do show in brown tack, however I have seen more than a fair few people high-end showing in black tack. Unless it specifically says it in the show schedule dress code or tack code, I don't know what you want to call it, unless it says somewhere for your specific showing society group or the specific show you're going to, which it shouldn't for low-level shows anyway. It's not a big deal for low-level shows. Unless it specifically says somewhere that you have to use brown tack, black tack is fine, or brown tack is fine. I probably wouldn't turn up in a bright pink saddle, to be fair. I know they exist and people use them, so keep it natural is going to be what I'm going to say about colour for tack. Just keep it natural. Ideally, with saddle pads, so going back to saddle pads here, you want to match your saddle pad either to the colour of your saddle or to the colour of your horse. Now, I have done both in the past. Woody he's a red Blagden, but he's predominantly white coloured, so I have used white saddle pads. I now use a brown saddle pad because I think that looks a little bit more smart on him. However, whatever you have is absolutely fine. Now, that is going to be the point of this video, much like our last video with regards to clothing. If you haven't watched that yet, I'll go ahead and put a link in the description down below so you can catch up on that one as well. But yeah, the biggest point I want to make with all of this is, for low-level showing, it's not a big deal what you use. Your everyday saddle will be absolutely fine. You don't want to be using like the big square saddle pads. You don't want to be using like thick fur. Actually, bear with me a moment. I'm going to go and grab some and I will show you some examples of the sorts of pads you don't want to be using, just for clarity here. Okay, so I have just grabbed a couple of other saddle pads just to give you a bit more clarity on this. So here I've got a big old square pad. It's not ideal, I'll explain why in a moment, and the same with this one. Now, this looks like it would be a good candidate for showing. Maybe with other horses it would work, but with mine it doesn't, because it doesn't fit neatly under the saddle. You want something that fits neatly and discreetly under your saddle. So big square saddle pads are out. You want a small, discreet saddle pad. Something that's not going to obstruct your horse. Basically, when you're showing, you want to show off your horse to its best, so you don't want to be hiding half of him under some great big saddle pad. You want the saddle pad to just be barely poking out from under your saddle, really. A lot of people actually won't bother to use a saddle pad when they're showing. However, I don't particularly like that, just because I find it just doesn't suit me and my horses, basically. But if that's something you want to try, absolutely go for it. A lot of professionals do that. And it relieves the need to have a showing saddle pad, so saves you money. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and chuck this on him now to show you guys, and then we will move on to bridles. Okay, there we go. So, as you can see, that saddle pad is super discreet. It's not the best fit in the world. It is a cheap saddle pad and it's fairly old. Story of my life, everything I have is cheap and old. But you can see that looks nice and smart and discreet, which is ideal for showing. Now, this saddle is actually quite forward cut, which I'm not keen on. I would like it to be a bit straighter cut on him. But, I'm going to keep saying it, it's fine. I have used this saddle, well, this was the first saddle I bought for Woody. I've had it for like 7 years, I think, 6-7 years, something like that. Apart from his first like training saddle. This is the first saddle I bought for him, and I have used this in every show I've ever been to, and it has served us well. So you don't need to go out and buy a fancy second saddle for showing. You really don't, guys. Use what you have. It's absolutely fine to just use what you have, and don't let people make you think that you can't go into the show ring unless you have a fancy show saddle. So there we go. That is our saddle and saddle pad on. Oh dear, he's all itchy. Now, in the cob showing world, fancy is out. You want plain, simple, working tack is how it's sort of generally described. They like a nice, well-fitted bridle. Thicker leather is generally preferred on cobs, just because thin leather straps can look a little bit lost on them, especially if you've got a chunky cob. I mean, Woody has a very petite face, but that is actually an extra full head. So some tack can look a little bit dwarfed on him, so that's worth bearing in mind as well. You want to have something on your horse that complements their features, basically. Isn't that right, sweet boy? But again, I'm going to keep saying this, for low-level shows, fun shows, local shows, use what you have. I'm going to keep saying that until I'm blue in the face, because it's what people need to understand. Just use what you have. Another thing I want to say with regards to bridles, so let's pop down here for a moment. So we can get those in the shot. Okay, so I've got 2 bridles here. This is a normal cavesson with a snaffle. On this one, I've got a pelham bit with the double reins. Now, we're going to start with the snaffle bridle. The first thing I want to say about bridles is it needs to be simple. So in the show ring, you don't want flashes, grackles, any weird or fancy nosebands. It needs to be a plain, simple noseband. Now, with most things, there's a lot of wiggle room. However, this is one of those things that you are going to get marked down on regardless of what level you're showing at. If you go into the show ring with a flash on or grackle or any other kind of weird bridle, noseband, whatever, you're going to get marked down, sadly. That is pretty much across the board. So you want a plain cavesson noseband. Depending on your horse's features, you might want to get a chunkier noseband, but if you don't want to go spend money, just use what you have. Seriously, just use your everyday bridle. Give it a good scrub up, you're good to go, honestly. And you want a plain snaffle bit. Again, bits are pretty particular for showing. Generally speaking, you either want your plain snaffle, your pelham, or if you're going like way high end, some people will use a double bridle. I've never done that. The furthest I'm ever going to go is a pelham, to be honest. It's more than acceptable across the levels for showing. That's just personal choice. If anybody out there wants to go ahead and explore using a double bridle, go for it, guys. Go and explore. Oh, being invaded by my cat. Lovely. But yeah, so my honest recommendation for the first time shower would be to stick with this. Stick with your plain old snaffle bridle and your single reins. That is more than acceptable. It's what the majority of people will be showing in, and it's going to be easy and familiar for you and your horse. If you decide that you want to up the game a bit and you want to look a little bit more grown up and you want to go for the pelham with the double reins, please, please, please make sure you practice in it way before your show. Your horse is going to have to get used to wearing this bit. He's going to have to get used to the fact that there are 2 reins instead of 1, and you're going to have to learn how to use the double reins as well. And that is going to take time. I would recommend, if you can, if you want to use this, to go and get a riding lesson from someone who knows how to use this, so that they can show you how to use it correctly. Now, that's not to scare or intimidate anyone, it's just because it is different. It took me a while to get my head around it, and it took my horse a while to learn to accept that as well. One of my horses is still yet to accept the pelham, even though she wears Liverpool bits for driving. This and the double reins and everything, she's not comfortable in it. She needs a lot more work in it. And the last thing you want to do is take your horse out into the show ring in a strange bit that neither of you are familiar with, and you're both going to be uncomfortable and worrying about it. That's not what you want. So my honest advice is stick with this to start with. If you've done a couple of shows and you're feeling like you want to up your game a bit, go ahead and invest in a pelham, get your double reins, and go and get a lesson and practice in it. Again, colour. black or brown is fine. It really doesn't matter that much. You want to make sure the colour complements your horse, obviously, and you want to make sure that your tack matches. I will put my hands up and admit that in desperation, because my horse was just growing ridiculously and we had no tack to fit him, I have been to a show wearing mismatched tack before. I don't know if the judge was just being really kind and didn't call me out on it. Luckily no one said anything. But yeah, I had a black saddle and a brown bridle. Just not good. But then again, it was fine. I mean, we still got placed, so that was good. So I guess it's not as big a deal as you would think, but preferably you want your tack to match colour. Another thing with bridles and bits as well is that if you are entering any novice classes, you will only be permitted to use the snaffle. You won't be allowed to use the pelham. Again, if there are going to be any restrictions on tack, it will usually say in the show schedule. You may get a little note underneath the class that will say, I don't know, snaffle bits only, or, you know, if there are any rules with regards to what tack you can use in a class, it will normally say on there. But across the board, novice classes are always ridden in a snaffle only with the single reins. But pretty much all the other classes are going to be open to using a pelham bridle. I'm going to go ahead and pop these bridles on Woody. I'm going to pop both of them on him, one after the other, to show you the difference. This is completely acceptable. Loads and loads of people showing this. So don't feel like you have to go out and get the big boy bridle. You're fine using this, and like I said, I would recommend using this to start with. But yeah, you will see that whilst this looks good, this is just going to look a little bit more grown up on them. So let me pop those on and show you that. Okay, so there we have plain snaffle bridle on him. Oh, I clipped him the other day and that's a bit loose now. So yeah, there we go. That is how I show a lot of the time. That looks very smart, very simple. You will be forgiven for not having the best looking tack in the world. Honestly, it's not a big deal. One thing you will not be forgiven for, however, is having dirty tack. So I have given this all a quick wipe over for the video today, but one thing I will say about tack and showing, put some effort into scrubbing it up, honestly, because the judges are going to be looking closely. Even at low level shows, you may get a judge run their hand over your tack. It's not going to be as big a deal at a low level show, but you're going to get some serious brownie points for having amazingly clean tack. That will be noticed, honestly. So there you go, there's a little pro tip for you. Make sure your tack is spotlessly clean. But yeah, there we go with plain Cavison snaffle bridle. I'm going to go ahead and pop the pelham bridle on him now, just so you can have a look at the difference. Okay, there we go, guys. So that is the pelham bridle with double reins. Now, as you can see, that just looks a lot more grown up, a lot more smart. Hey, head up, big man. Yeah, so if you want to do a lot of showing, this is what you want to be aiming for, really. However, when you're starting out, the first bridle I showed is more than acceptable. You don't have to feel pressurised to go ahead and get one of these and, you know, have to train your horse to learn the new bit and have to learn how to use the double reins. Don't feel pressurised to rush into all of that. That first bridle I showed you is what you want to be aiming for beginners level showing. This is what you want to be aiming for once you've done a few shows and you realise you're enjoying it and you want to up your game a little bit. But yeah. Oh, he's all sleepy. I personally think that it just looks a lot more grown up, and I have to say, when when you move up the levels a little bit, the judges do appreciate you wearing this, just because it looks more grown up. It really does. But yeah, there we go. All ready to go, aren't you, big man? Again, nice and simple. And I would like to point out as well, this bridle right here, I don't know if I can get a shot of the badge. It's from the Avon range. Now, that range, I want to say it's a Shire's range, but I will double check that, and I'll put the details in the description down below. This bridle was dirt cheap. Now, prices seem to have changed for everything since I've last bought stuff, so don't hold me on this. But I paid like £28 for this bridle, and then I just had to go and buy an extra set of reins and a pelham bit. And I think it's super smart. It's a really nice leather. It's completely plain, there's no fancy bits on it. The only fancy bit on it is that little piece of print up here, which you can't see anyway because it's on top of the horse's head. And I think they're really good bridles. So I'm going to go and see what the prices are on those, and if they're even still available. If they are, I'll pop those in the description down below, because seriously, they're a really, really good starter bridle for showing. And they're really good bridles, full stop. I have about 3 or 4 from this range now, and I love them. They're really nice leather, really easy to clean, really smart looking, and they're dirt cheap, which I love, because I have no money. So yeah, there we go. That is your ridden tack covered. I'm going to get that off of him, and then we're going to have a look at some in-hand tack next. Right, onto in-hand showing. Now, when you're showing in hand, most people will say to you that you need to have an in-hand bridle, and that is absolutely not the case. You do not have to have an in-hand bridle. Now, what I will do is I will take my normal snaffle bridle, that one. So this is his normal bridle. This is the first bridle I put on him a minute ago. And what I will do is I will take the reins off, and I will go ahead and use a leather lead rope, or I will go ahead and use just a smart black lead rope, or there's a spider on there, that's horrible, put that to one side. Or if you don't have a smart enough lead rope, use the reins. Literally pop your normal bridle on, reins over the horse's head, and use that. That is perfectly acceptable for low level showing. Now, when you go up the levels a little bit, that is going to be a bit frowned upon. The bridle itself will be fine, but you really want to aim for a lead rather than using the reins. With low level fun shows, local shows, which is what the focus of this video is all about, you can absolutely just put a normal bridle on your horse, reins over the head, and use that. Well, like I said, this is just a normal cheap lead rope. I mean, these are like the $3.99 ones you get. It's covered in dog hair. But these are like the $3.99 ones you get in any tack store, and thread it underneath like you would if you were going to have a, you know, take a walk with a lead ring pony or something. So under the chin, clip it on the other side of the bit. What you can also get hold of is things like this. So they will clip onto the bit. This one is actually for our mini Shetland, that won't fit this bit. This is another one we've got. So it clips onto the bit like that. And then obviously you've got your lead rope on here. So that's another option. But yeah, you honestly don't have to have an in-hand bridle. So don't stress about that. Don't feel like you need to go out and buy one. If you do want to buy one, go for it. Absolutely encourage that. But you don't have to have it. So if you don't want to spend the money, don't feel pressurized that you have to, because it really is as simple as that. Literally what I've just shown you. The whole point of this video is to explain to you guys to just use what you have, and I really mean that. As long as it's clean, preferably colour coordinated, it fits your horse well, you're going to be absolutely fine, and I really mean that. You don't need to worry about getting fancy, very specific tack until you're way high level showing. And even then, I've watched a lot of people doing it, even then a lot of people are using everyday cheap tack, general purpose saddles, you know. If it looks good, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about what the label says. As long as it looks good, you're good to go. I am going to go ahead and put some links in the description down below for some of the things that I've featured in the video today. So, like the leather leads, the bridle that I mentioned that I had on Woody a minute ago, the Avemore one, some of the saddle pads we're using, the bits we're using, and things like that, just so that if you guys do want or need to get anything, you've got a starting point. And I think that's pretty much it for today's episode, guys. My glamorous assistant is nodding off. He's been so sweet. You're such a good model, aren't you, Woody? You're so much better than Blue. Blue fidgets. You're an angel, aren't you? Look at that face. A beautiful, beautiful face. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining me for this one. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. If you have any video requests for this series, anything that you'd like me to cover, again, put those down in the comments section and I will check those out and see if I can incorporate that into the series for you. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this was helpful for someone. I hope it encourages someone to brave it and get out there and have a go at showing. It can be an intimidating thing to go into, but it shouldn't be. And it really is my hope that this series is going to do a lot of myth busting and give people a lot of clarity and encouragement that they can do this and that you don't need to have fancy stuff, you don't need to have a ton of experience, you just need to go for it basically, you just need to be brave enough to have a go. Thanks for joining me today, guys, and I will see you all next time. Bye.